Tuesday, December 19th, 2017. Director F., will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Chairperson Mateo.
Here.
Commissioner Scanlon. Here. Commissioner Hammond.
Here.
Commissioner Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Pelletier.
Here.
Absent is Commissioner Mendoza. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes for the Planning and Zoning regular meeting and public hearing from August 23rd, 2017?
Motion to approve.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Oppose? Abstain?
Abstain.
Thank you. Any communications? Comments from the audience? Okay. Trustee liaison report?
Just two very brief items. Last board meeting, we had a discussion on front-loaded garages that might be worth you all taking a look at because it's coming your way probably next meeting, Sonia, I would guess. The other thing, the village has commissioned a study to review all the facilities and real estate owned by the village, and that's something that you probably should all have on your radar screen as well. And any ideas, thoughts, pie in the sky things would be very, very helpful because it's going to be a very thorough and detailed review. That's it.
So now we'll call to order the public hearing and let the record show that all commissioners are still present. This is PZ 17-10-10. A public hearing to consider a request for a special use to expand the existing special use for a church by building an office addition and variations from section 10-4-5, table 3 of the Riverside zoning ordinance, which establishes the maximum impervious surface areas for the residential zoning districts, and section 10-8-9, table 8 of the Riverside zoning ordinance, which establishes the required off-street parking requirements in residentially zoned districts, and such other relief as is necessary in order to build a 2,700 square foot office addition for the existing church. The petitioner is Reverend Thomas May on behalf of St. Mary Catholic Church. Director App, will you swear in the petitioner and interested persons?
Anybody who's going to testify for this one, if you could just raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
And then continue with the staff summary, please.
Okay. You have before you the application from St. Mary's. They have their architect here to represent them today to kind of walk us through the project. But as you just went through, we have a property here that is zoned both R1A and R4. You'll notice in your packet that this property faces Herrick Road. However, it does extend down to Burlington, so part of it is zoned R4. That's the parking lot in the back that is accessed off of Burlington Street. Petitioner is proposing to build a one-story office addition on the east side of the church, off of the gym. This would be to support their parish support staff. Currently, they're located across the street, and they're looking to move them on site to where the church is. This addition is approximately 2,700 square feet. It's one story tall. The building coverage is at about 21% currently, and the impervious coverage is at about 62.4%. With the proposed addition, the building coverage is going to increase to 23%, which is within our code allowance, but the impervious surface goes up to 63.2%, both of which are over our maximum for the R1A district, which is 50%. So church is considered a special use. That is why they need the special use. So in order to expand the special use, we need to amend their special use for that expansion. Additionally, they are looking for a variance for their parking requirement by adding this addition. It's increasing their parking requirement, and so they already do not meet the requirement, and so this is going to push them over, so they're requesting a variance to not have to provide that additional parking. You have before you their site plan, as well as elevations that you can take a look at. You have in your packet the standards for the variation, as well as the standards for the special use that you are supposed to use as you consider the case before you for the variations in special use. We'll answer any questions that you have, and their architect is here to kind of walk you through their plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm guessing you're not David. What is your name, please?
Susan Mash.
Thank you.
And I'm with Yeager Nicola Kuhlman, the architect working with St. Mary's. And as Sonia indicated, we are here to ask for an amendment to the existing special use and to ask for the two variances, one for the parking requirement and one for the allowable impervious requirement. And so here you can see your zoning map, and the property, their main property is on the south side of Herrick Road, and that's where the addition will be. They also have property across the street where the rectory is located, and as Sonia indicated, currently it is the parish residence, and most of the offices for the parish are located in that same building. So this is just an image of the site plan on the south side. So we have the existing school building and the existing parish center, which the school and the church both utilize, the existing church, and then also a 134 space parking lot. Our new addition is going to be located in the southeast corner. It is 2,700 square feet, and it will be for the parish offices. So, as I indicated, across the street they have the existing rectory. So it was built in 1970. Its intent never was to be offices and a residence. Its intent was to be a residence. So as time passed between 1970 and now, offices got moved in there. It was supposed to be temporary. Well, it ended up not being temporary. So now they would kind of like to return it back to the original, which was to be a residence. So this addition, it'll do a couple things for them. Their main goal is to get a residence for the priest, the staff to the area that they serve, right? They're serving the church. It'll bring everybody together because they have 3 parish offices also in the school, so now everybody will be in the same location. And it also will add the vestibule to that main entrance which you'll see in the floor plan later, because currently there's an entrance there that has no vestibule, so that addition does this as well. So from a variance perspective, we are required to have 145 parking spaces. So in this plan, we're not changing the parking lot at all. We have 134 parking spaces. There are 7 spaces across the street at the rectory. There's also 3 garage spaces. We cannot count those towards our total because we're not contiguous with that, but they are spaces that are available. With this addition, we don't believe that we're adding any parking load to this lot or any traffic. The people are already there. They are across the street currently, but they utilize both lots, so we don't believe that we're adding any additional traffic to the area or any additional parking need. We did extend an invitation out to the surrounding neighbors. We did have one neighbor, the resident that lives adjacent to the east, come, and through our conversations with her, we actually discovered something interesting, that the one complaint she had was that visitors park across the street from the rectory right in front of her house. So I think that is another benefit of this new addition, is now no one's going to park in that spot, which I have parked in that spot. And now it's no longer a desirable spot. So I think another benefit is that we're doing, improving the on-street parking for this, because more people are going to be encouraged. The staff currently parks where they're supposed to, but visitors, kind of parked at the closest spot. The second,
Can I ask for clarification on that? So you're indicating that people are parking there during the week when there are meetings, as opposed to parishioners parking there on during Mass.
Right.
Okay.
It's just the people who don't know that park there. So I think a lot of that will be alleviated by this addition. The other requirement, the variance that we're asking for, is for the impervious requirement, and you could see in the area, that highlighted red area, that's all sidewalk right now. So again, there's very minimal change that's happening as a base of this addition. So, it is a 0.8% increase. The other thing that the church wanted to do was, there's an existing drive at that corner where the arrow is. There used to be a house there. That little portion of drive is still there. They would like to remove that as a part of this project, just to kind of go back to making that pervious. So because of the minimal increase, we feel like there's a very little drainage impact. It'll all still drain the same as it does now. There are catch basins in the parking lot. The other thing that Sonia did indicate is we do have 2 zoning districts. So the R14 requires only has 50% allowable. But the R4 district, which is the parking lot, does allow 65. So one could argue that we are in compliance with that requirement because we're at 63.4%. As far as the floor plan goes, here's the existing entrance, and now we have this lobby vestibule space which would lead to the school building, so it creates that weather lock, also a nice entrance. We have meeting space and the new office space and its associated items with that. As far as the design of the building, it will be designed to blend with the existing school and church that's there, so the original church and school. And so it will match the brick, it will match the detailing of that building, so it'll look like it was always there. The other nice benefit of this building is it kind of creates, right now, the two buildings in the back, the parish center is 27 foot 2 inches tall, and the school is 31 foot 8 from the grade, and our new building will be 18 feet from grade, so it kind of creates a lower perspective from the neighborhood, so we feel it's a great asset. We are requesting that you approve our special use. We feel that we're not changing the use of the building. We're just adding the associated functions with the church and the school that are required. We request that you approve our parking lot variance. We don't feel that we're adding any additional traffic and only improving the current situation. And request that you approve our variance to the impervious allowance because we're adding very little impervious and because of the R4 district, which allows the 65%. That's what I got.
Any questions?
Was there any consideration of pavers or anything to make it more impervious? Or?
Well, if we go back to the site plan, I'm trying to think if that's the best place to see it. We're doing very little, so in this plan, you can see the gray area. I'm basically showing that area is the area that's disturbed by construction. I will actually probably be less than that, so we're really not adding any parking in order to make it paving. I guess the impact is there's so little that we're doing, modification that we're making.
But I guess to just play that Commissioner Rockwell's question further, because you're already, for the R1A section, over the allowable impervious, would you consider making any of the existing parking spots more permeable with different kind of paving? I think, is that where we're going?
No, more the sidewalk, but I don't know if that necessarily makes it safer, so just looking for what considerations you have.
I mean, from a parking perspective, we would wish not to disturb more than we needed to, obviously from a monetary reason, from an MWRD, you know, from all the things that disturbing more leads to.
More so.
And what would that lead to?
If we disturb too much, it could lead to additional volume control requirement from MW to RD. So I think we're within the limit of just disturbing what we need to, and that falls within of not requiring any additional volume control or detention or anything like that.
So what you're saying is the site does not currently meet detention requirements of MWRD, and if you were to disturb more pavement on the site, that it may require you then to meet the existing?
No, I'm not saying we don't meet it now.
Okay.
Because they've made changes to the MWRD requirements, now as any projects moving forward, it starts the amount, it starts the clock, right? I'm disturbing this much now. So then the next project, I'm going to disturb this much, and it keeps adding until you reach their requirement of where it's required. So because we're not disturbing that much, we're not required to do anything at this time.
Right.
But if we do something in the future, you know, it's going to add on to what we're doing now, right? So each time, so there will come a time where that would be required.
But what you're saying then is that the existing site, if you were to try to build this at this time, you would be required to provide detention for the site?
No, I'm not, I don't think that that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's a requirement by MWRD that once you disturb so much, then you need to do something. So I'm not saying that if we would build this today, if we would build just this today, just that piece,
No,
we
no,
would
I mean, if you were to build this entire site, if this was an undisturbed site and you were planning to build what you have there, you would have to provide detention. You're kind of being grandfathered right now.
Probably.
Okay, that's.
I mean, I
that
haven't
was the
asked my,
only-
I haven't asked my civil engineer, but if I use just a common sense standpoint that MWRD rules have changed so much that common sense would lead me to say yes to that answer.
If I could just go back to Commissioner Marhol's question, and I think we got a little bit distracted by focusing on converting parking spaces. I'm concerned about the impervious surface areas, and if I'm reading, I think it was the prior slide.
Yeah, here.
We're taking some of the concrete area, but my question is, are there opportunities to, use more porous materials if that sidewalk is being recreated, which I'm assuming it would be as part of the construction phase?
The sidewalk definitely
If
is.
that's an opportunity to, minimize this sort of increase in the impervious surface areas.
I mean, I guess it could be entertained. I'm going to kind of go back to what you were starting to allude to, is that, I don't know, the desirability of doing the pavers on the sidewalk area as things over time, right? Pavers sometimes start to settle differently. If you think of pavers in your own house and area, they will start to settle and then create maybe something that's not as safe to walk on. And I should say, like, if I look on my, let's see if I can use the pointer. Is the pointer the middle?
No, it's the
top.
top one.
Okay, if I look at my civil drawings, they really show like a line out to here of what the parking is being removed. So I'm showing a lot more being removed than they are. I guess I was just being a little more cautious from a construction bidding standpoint, that I wanted to show more than, but they are showing a lot less being disturbed.
So just so I'm clear, the use of pavers or other alternative is not being considered?
I guess we haven't considered it up to this point. I don't want to say we won't consider it. I would just, from a sidewalk perspective, I don't know that I would be excited.
Riverside.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Do you know the history of the zoning of this entire piece of property? That it's R1A, and you said it was built in 1970, the church was built in 1970?
The rectory was built across the street in 1970. I believe the church was built in 1926. Our firm did put the addition on in 1996, but I do not know the zoning process for that one.
I'm just
I
wondering
apologize.
if it was R1A when it was originally built, and if that was imposed on the church property afterwards.
I think it's always been zoned residential, or whether R1A came after there just being an R1.
But it was residential.
I think it's always been residential over there, yes. In the past, churches were considered a permitted use in residential districts. When we did the 2005 rewrite of the zoning code, they became special uses. And so all existing churches were grandfathered in and created as special uses in those districts by adopting that ordinance, so.
And then the squarish piece of property that borders Burlington, that was always been business B2 or R4 or something like that?
It's R4.
So I'm not exactly sure how long it's been R4, but I know it's been a fairly long time.
And the 63.4%
Yes.
of impervious applies to the entire lot, including both the R1A and the R4. if you
Yes.
Correct.
Combine the area.
The total site.
Do you have any idea how often the parking lot is completely full?
I'm gonna,
Weekends. Other weekends, basically.
So can you repeat that into the microphone? So
Sure.
that
Father was indicating that on the weekends, that the parking lot is full.
And again, you might have to translate unless you want to be sworn in. How is the parking lot configured with cars and on school days? Because I see the kids running around. There's probably places where people can't park, right?
Right, so right now, I believe that this whole area is the playground. And then this during the day is utilized for parking.
So with the increase in staff working at the addition, they can be accommodated in that lot?
So, yeah, I mean, so I think maybe the question is, how full is this lot during the day?
For the most part, it's empty.
Do I have to repeat that?
Please.
It's empty for the most part.
But I- couple cars, but,
So it sounds like they would be able to be accommodated on that side.
The lot for morning mass at 8:15, and then the office opens at 9 o'clock, so people leave the lot at 8:15, and then the office is open at 9 o'clock, so.
That's fine.
Okay.
Other questions? Nobody else raised their hands to be sworn in, but at this point, are there other interested parties that would like to say anything? All righty. Thank you. So, do we have questions for Director Add? Do you have more to add at this point?
Really? I think we all got the basics.
Well, unless there's more to add, do we want to have a motion to close or continue or close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So Attorney Mars, we have three things to discuss, the special use and the two variations. Normally, I would ask for a motion and then discuss each one and vote separately, but given that we have three different things to discuss, Attorney Mars said that we can we'll start with just a general discussion, get the lay of the land, see what our thoughts are. So if anybody would like to start, please chime in.
I would say that in consideration of the special use and the parking, both seem not very problematic. But with regard to impervious, I feel like, number one, the site is already not meeting the current requirements of the MWRD from the standpoint of detention with regard to new construction. So in an attempt not to kind of kick in those requirements, we're minimizing the disruption of impervious surface so that, the new requirements don't kick in. And then we're not providing or considering an impervious surface for that parking area because we don't want to disturb it. So I just feel like these things are kind of building up. The fact is that the requirement for impervious partially is to minimize runoff. So there is opportunity to provide impervious paving to mitigate that. And I think that it should be explored. So I don't think that with not meeting the existing impervious, we certainly shouldn't allow it to be increased. And I think that we should try to do everything we can to get it closer to what the requirement is.
So on that topic, do other commissioners have similar or different thoughts?
I agree with what the commissioner has said. That was my concern as well, is that it's a small increase, but still we're adding, impervious surface. And I appreciate that it probably isn't ideal for the sidewalk to be, for pavers to be used for that, but I was hoping that maybe some of the parking could, that we could start to replace some of that with a different surface. Obviously not everything all at once, but over time, as the parking lot starts to crumble in areas, to try to start moving toward a more, an area that could absorb runoff and such.
Can I ask a question of Sonia?
Please.
Sonia, she mentioned that the architect mentioned that they're going to remove that small paved area on the easternmost lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that calculated into the
Yes.
overall?
Yes.
Okay.
This might be more of a theoretical question, but Commissioner Peltier, when we think about impervious and stormwater, would drywalls be equally adequate in terms of dealing with runoff or the extra?
Well,
Really, it would be relatively easy to capture that rainwater that landed on the roof of the new addition.
yes. I'm not sure what the kind of ratio would be for a dry well versus a, impervious or a pervious paver.
I'm
It
just
seems
thinking
like
in terms
the-
of cost as well.
Yeah.
Go on, what were you
Sure.
about to?
Just that, a dry well is not very large, so are you really just making that much impervious?
I'm considering the dry wells that have been installed in the vicinity of where I live, where they've put stone around it and dug out a larger hole and made it more of a storage zone.
Right. I'm not sure how that would, I'm not sure what the offset would be, I guess. This could be something we could consider.
On the other two issues, I think the special use is consistent with what the property is already being used for, so I don't see any reason to go against that, and I think the parking issue is also not really an issue. I took a quick look at the other churches in our area, and almost none of them have anything that would be considered significant amounts of parking, so I don't think this property is any different from any of the others in our town, in our area with regards to meeting requirements.
Going back to the issue of minimizing the variance over the impervious surface area, in my mind, moving to, let's put pavers in the parking lot that's not necessarily ready for replacement doesn't seem a realistic route to explore at this time. And just, are there other alternatives? I know there's a reluctance to put pavers on the sidewalk, but is that worth abandoning at this point, or is it worth further feedback from St. Mary's on an approach to minimize the expansion of the variance.
Well, we could make pavers a condition of, recommend making pavers a condition of approval of the variance.
And I guess in my mind, I'd like to know how percentage-wise, what that helps or hurts. I mean, is that, if it's not going to move the dial materially, that's sort of a non-issue then. If it does get it back closer to where the percentage is now, that makes sense. I don't know if we have enough information, if that's been considered or even measured on with the pavers. What does that change?
Well, the village voted, I don't know how many years ago, to go green. There was an overwhelming 80% in favor of it, and the village government has taken a stance to develop sustainably whenever possible. So that's why we have the green parking lot in Burlington, and hopefully the parking lot by the swim club, the commuter lot, will be replaced with pavers. So there's sort of a precedent for that. Again, for village projects.
I think not quite as specific as what Commissioner is saying, but to require an additional look at ways to reduce runoff, whatever those methods might be. I don't think I want to be in a position of specifying we want this solution or that solution, but there are tools out there available to the site developers to mitigate runoff. Pavers, dry wells, rain gardens, what have you. I don't think we want to be that specific.
But would you want to say a condition that they do something rather than consider something? Is that even possible?
Yeah, there's one possible solution is to propose that they bring additional information to the board. So you would move it along with a proposal that they bring to the board additional ways to ensure the increase in impervious surface is mitigated in some way.
I'd rather go that direction.
And again, I think the point was made, cost being an issue. It's if there's a number of alternative solutions, I think it should be the opportunity of the property owner to pick which of those alternative solutions gets us, closer to not varying this 62.4% pre-existing variation.
A question for you, Sonia. Would they require, Michael, would a variance still be required if they were not increasing their impervious?
No.
No.
All right, so if they were maintaining it at the 62 or whatever. Because
right.
I think...
Because that's legal non-conforming at this point.
Right. Because I think that our ordinance currently makes it possible to propose an impervious surface that would, or pervious pavers rather, that would mitigate even the need for the variance, I guess. So as opposed to bringing something more to the board, it seems to me that it should be possible to not require that variance by using permeable pavers. It is written in the ordinance currently that there's a credit for surfaces that are or permeable pavers.
Yeah,
so if part of that
you provide a credit, right? Is it?
Precisely. It won't count towards
Okay.
it. So basically, it's a zero.
Okay.
So if they were to change out the sidewalk to permeable, then I would take away that number from their total of impervious surface coverage.
But if the church opted to store water, they would still need a variation if they didn't use pavers, right?
Correct. I mean, if they went with an alternate route saying we would provide a rain garden or a dry well to help offset some of the runoff from the building footprint, you still have impervious surface that's over the allowable amount. So that doesn't negate the need for the variance, but at least then they can show that this is how we're trying to deal with
Right, that there's no,
with that issue.
there's no net negative effect, correct? If they are able to provide alternative
Yeah,
measures.
depending on what the calculation of that compensation
Yeah.
storage is, right?
Does the pervious paver surface need to be one of these highly engineered pervious paver systems like at the green lot? Or can it be something like tearing up some parking spaces, putting in some bricks with grass growing? I mean, is there anything in the ordinance about exactly what it has to be? Or could it be gravel being put down for some
Well, we
parking
don't allow
spaces?
gravel,
You-
but
I was afraid you were gonna say that.
not an approved paving material. It does make allowances for like grasscrete, pervious, but they are looking for them to provide, basically by an engineer or a landscaper or somebody that can kind of calculate that this is a truly permeable surface.
And I'm not saying it wouldn't be
Right.
fully permeable, but my understanding is for some of these new highly engineered things, they take a lot of maintenance and they're can be fairly expensive to put in.
Right.
As opposed to like someone doing it in their own driveway, you know, tearing it up and putting in the grasscrete or whatever. And so, but I like the idea, Commissioner Marvel's idea, of letting the petitioner come up with ideas as opposed to us here doing that.
And just sort of my view on this is, you know, right now it's a request for a variation with no suggestions on how to counteract that addition of non-impervious. And I think what I would have liked to have seen is, you know, if they can't increase the amount of impervious surface because it's too cost expensive, to get an alternative solution. Here's how we're addressing the reason behind the rule to counteract you know, the reason why we're creating more service space. I mean, to me that's you know, when you look at the body of, and I'm sure at some point we'll go through the conditions required for this, but you know, in my mind that's sort of what's embodied here. You know, it's not just allow the variance, but understand what, you know, what adversity is really being created in itself from there.
A thought that occurred to me when I was reviewing all this is if it would be possible for the petitioner to request rezoning to R4, in which they get 65% impermeable surface allowed, and they border R4, part of the property is R4. I don't know if that's something that could be pursued or would have any impact on everyone else's view of this, but.
I'd say I wouldn't make that a requirement because
No, I'm not saying
all of the other
I'm saying that the
houses
petitioner
before should
could, no, right, I'm saying that the petitioner, I don't know, that's what I was asking about whether this R1A or the residential zoning was imposed on them, whereas the R4 was, you know, if they just came in, this was sort of the existing zoning, because clearly they're not a residence. The rectory may be a residence, but they are not, and we're very close to what's allowed by R4, so, which they border and include, so I just think that some of the discussion is a little beside the point, to look at it from that practical standpoint.
I think that might be more of a stretch only from the standpoint of the part of the property that's on Herrick is the R1A, and
But I'm saying
everything
if they could-
along Herrick, you know, it's that density that's being created and maintained along Herrick as opposed to the R4, which is on Burlington, which is a much higher density. So really,
Right, but I'm guessing that the amount of, I think the amount of building that they have on the property, and as we discussed, the impervious surface, they're basically built out, and I doubt that anyone's going to tear the church down anytime soon and put residences in there. So I'm just saying, to me, a practical solution at some point could be that they petition to be rezoned to R4. That's all. That's something that jumped out at me.
Other concerns, comments, questions?
I do have one question, and maybe in the material, and I didn't catch it, but what is the square footage increase?
2,700.
Oh, it is.
From 1,200 surface.
It's in the zoning information box.
Of the addition.
It's about 1,200 square feet that it's actually being added from what's existing out there.
Okay. And a parking space is 200.
Of the addition? Is that what you're asking?
The net number, so
Right,
what's the net increase
increase
in
in-
impervious surface?
Oh, okay. Thought you were asking about the addition.
Total, so it's about 1,200 square feet.
Okay, can I have a motion to recommend approval of the special use permit?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. So there are several standards to be met, that the proposed use is designated as a special use in the district in which the use is to be located. I think we agree on that one. Proposed use will comply with all applicable regulations in the district in which the use is to be located. I think we agree there. Location and size of the proposed use, the nature and intensity of the operation involved or conducted in connection with it, the size of the site in relation to it, and the location of the site with respect to streets giving access to it are such that it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it is located. Location, nature, and height of buildings, walls, and fences, and the nature and extent of the landscaping on the site are such that the use will not unreasonably hinder or discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings. Parking areas will be of adequate size for the particular use, properly located and suitably screened from all adjoining uses, and the exit and entrance drives will be laid out so as to prevent traffic hazards and nuisances. Proposed use will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood. Last one doesn't apply. At least 1 year has elapsed since any denial by the village board of any prior application for a special use permit. Will you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Marvel?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Commissioner Hannan?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
I have a motion to recommend approval of a variation for the parking lots, parking spaces. Let me spell that out. Variation, sorry folks, from section 10.8.9, table 8, which establishes the required off-street parking requirements in residentially zoned districts. To recommend approval of that variation.
Motion to approve the parking variation.
Second.
So we have multiple standards that need to be upheld here. The first one is that there are practical difficulties or particular hardships in carrying out the strict letter of the regulations. I think this one's pretty clear. They can't build new parking spaces.
Yes.
Agreed.
The purpose of the variation is not based primarily on a desire to increase financial gain, not profit. Alleged difficulty has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property. Conditions upon which the petition for variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification. You said you looked at other churches and didn't think so. Granting the variation will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located. Granting the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And finally, the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property or substantially increase the congestion of the public streets or increase danger of fire, impair the natural drainage, or create drainage problems on adjacent properties or endanger the public safety or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. Sonia, please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioner Marvel?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Commissioner Hannon?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the next variation. How do we want to word it? Do we want to recommend approval or denial?
I move that we recommend denial based on the fact that they could mitigate the impervious and avoid the variation.
So given our record and the findings of fact that would go to the board would get the message that we strongly encourage the church to consider ways to mitigate drainage? Is that correct?
Yes, it sounds accurate.
Because if we're recommending denial, we can't put a condition on it.
Right.
You said if we're recommending denial, we can't put a condition on it.
Correct? Okay, sorry. Okay, so there's a motion.
Right, so the flip side would be to recommend approval with
With conditions.
conditions.
So will you say the motion again, please?
I move that we recommend denial of the variation.
Okay. Is there a second? Motion fails.
Motion fails for lack of a second. Does anyone have another motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions that the architect and civil engineer for the church go back and find some methods to mitigate the extra runoff. There may be better legalistic words for that. Michael, I was wondering if you could help with that.
Sure, absolutely.
I love putting him on the spot.
More the exact phrasing of recommending.
Right, so the gist is you want them to, at the board level, to provide some alternatives to the board, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
within reason, et cetera, et cetera.
right.
But to propose it, not just consider it, correct?
Propose. I think there are sufficient resources out there to mitigate the extra runoff that we are going to incur for 1,200 square feet.
So it's proposed approval on condition that the petitioner present to the board ideas
solution,
to
yes.
mitigate the impervious surface issue.
Yes.
Right, and my understanding is you're not necessarily tying them to going down to a 0% increase in impervious surface, because then they wouldn't need the variation, but just that they provide some evidence that they are
Some legitimate effort to
mitigate the
correct.
overall effect of the net impervious
Yes.
surface increase. Okay. So how about a motion to recommend approval of the variation for impervious surface coverage on the condition that the applicant, through its architect and civil engineer, propose to the board additional ways to ensure the increase in impervious surface is mitigated.
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you.
Can we define mitigate? Just because mitigate can mean a 5%,
Right.
we're only mitigating 5%, or, it should be a full mitigation
50% or more
of
of
The
the
runoff.
1,200 square feet. Mitigate, yeah.
So that raises a question for Sonia. Do you have any calculations? Did they provide anything that gives you the ability to determine what the net runoff would be?
No.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're able to provide?
I mean, I can ask the civil engineer to provide.
He can do it.
Or she.
Or she.
Right, because if we're putting a number on it, we need, obviously, something, the board's gonna need something to compare it against.
Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
And that was at the 50% number?
That's what my second was for, yeah.
If you're okay with that.
Okay.
So going through the standards, is there a practical difficulty or particular hardship? Well, the church can't plant a garden in the middle of the parking lot because we can't take away parking spaces. So I think we're in agreement that that has met. And given that I just read the other standards, does anybody want to go through any one in particular, or do we think they're met? Do you want me to go through them all?
No, you don't have to, and, as long as everyone agrees that with the condition, the standards will have been met, and that's what you're basing your voting on.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
All right, Commissioner Marble?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier?
No.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Commissioner Hannon?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
Aye.
Motion passes.
So, as you know, we're a recommending body. It goes to the board next. They make the final determination, and that might be hopefully sometime in January, if not early February.
Could be January.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Oh, thank you. Was that a flat roof that they were putting on the church?
Yes, it is.
I wonder if
going
they
to
just,
be-
what if they just put like a rooftop garden on there? If that would be considered. Or is that somewhere I have to drain the
You're
ground?
referring to the church?
Yes, yeah.
We get into maintenance issues. To work properly, pavage rooms to have.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, I was thinking like a rooftop garden.
Rooftop garden.
Yeah. Got it, okay.
Okay, let's call to order public hearing PC 17-11. Public hearing to consider request for variations from section 10-4-5, table 3 of the Riverside zoning ordinance, which requires a side setback of 10% of the lot width in all residential zoning districts, and section 10-10-4.c of the Riverside zoning ordinance, which prohibits additions or enlargements of non-conforming structures, and other such relief as is necessary to allow a two-story addition to be built onto the rear of an existing non-conforming home that encroaches approximately 5.6 feet, including the eaves, into the required 7.5-foot setback from the east property line. The proposed addition will extend the non-conforming wall and therefore also encroach into the required side yard setback. Petitioner is Brian Hammersley of Hammersley Architecture on behalf of the property owners, Alex Garcia, Laura Busar Garcia, and Louise Busar. Swear in the petitioners. Anybody who plans to speak?
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge? I do. Thank you.
Director App, if you give us a summary and confirm that the required notices were put out?
Yes. So notices were mailed out and published in the paper. Nice little sign was put in their yard. I hope you enjoy my handwriting. The property is zoned R1A, single-family residence district. It has an existing home on it that encroaches approximately 5.6 feet, including the eaves, into the required 7.5-foot setback from the east property line. In the nonconformities chapter of our zoning ordinance, it restricts additions to nonconforming structures. The code only allows additions that meet the bulk requirements or vertical extensions of nonconforming walls. So if they were just to go straight up, they would be allowed to do that. If they were to set the addition in so that it met the side yard setback, they wouldn't need to do a variance. So we do make some accommodations for non-conforming structures for you to be able to add on to them. However, what they're proposing to do is to put an addition that extends that non-conforming wall horizontally back towards their property line, so that wall still does not meet the setback. So they need a variance in order to be able to do that. The addition is a 2-story addition, and it's going to encroach approximately 3.2 feet into that required setback. According to the architect and the drawings they provided, the addition does not have eaves. Gutters are allowed to encroach into the setback, but eaves are not. This addition apparently does not have any eaves, and so therefore that encroachment is not quite as large as the main front portion of the home, where there is actually a fairly substantial eave off the for the roof. So, as I said, in order to build this addition, the petitioner does need the variation from our bulk requirements for the setback, as well as the restriction on non-conforming structures. So you have the text from the non-conforming chapters in your staff report, as well as the standards for variations before you. The petitioners are here along with their architects to kind of walk you through the project, and we're both here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Okay, which buttons does what?
Right arrow advances you to your next slide.
Okay, and if I want to point, middle?
Top button.
Top button. Laser, okay, great. Can I begin? Hi, my name is Brian Hammersley. I'm here to present 101 Lawton today and request a variance for the project that we are proposing for this site. As you can see, the existing condition right now is this is the existing house with the existing garage, and we are non-conforming. This house was built prior to the zoning, so it was already like Sonia spoke. It's set back into the space already, only leaving 3 feet of setback on the right side. The eaves that that are on the house right now are 2.5 feet, leaving almost like no setback, like 2 feet. What we're proposing is an addition that runs along this edge, along the non-conforming edge, and extends the non-conforming edge. We looked at what an addition would look like using the required setback, and I will show you as we go through the plans how this actually ends up being problematic to the design of the project from an interior perspective especially. As we look at what the site plan is currently, right now we have this is the existing property line. This is the eaves almost to the edge of it. This is what the proposed by zoning would be, and this is the edge of our house where we're looking to extend beyond there. Just to zoom in a little bit more to give you a little bit of a better perspective. So here's the existing edge of the house. Here's the existing edge of the eaves. Here is the property line. Here is what is required by the current code. And right here, this corner, what we're planning on doing is extending out from that portion. This, again, is just to give you a little bit of a closer view. So again, we're just extending out here. Exit from this space is right here into the backyard. When we go through the plan, I'll show you. So the access to the house continues straight through here. That is a major concern of ours from an architectural standpoint to maintain the integrity of a 4-square house, which this house is. Actually, go to that slide real quickly. Pardon me. This is a 4-square residence that we use for reference. As you'll see, the plan, the existing plan of the house is very similar to this. So this is the strong access of the house. This is the view access. You can see from the front door to the back door. It's a classic house. It's built throughout Riverside and other places, Oak Park, other historic communities. So we took that cue for our floor plan. So this is our property. This is the 101 Lawton. This is the existing setback, and this is the existing plan. So here is that consistent 4-square design sort of showing through. So this is the second floor, which has second floor is office in the rear. So this was what we're proposing, and this is what we're requesting, is to maintain that. We are looking to keep this in line here so that this whole space moves along this axis, still maintaining this view. This is important for two reasons. First reason is, I think in order to really keep the integrity of the architecture of this house and also its value, should it be resold by Hussar Garcia's, is that it maintains, I think, what is one of the better features of this home, is a view into an absolutely spectacular rear yard. Specifically to this project, however, the program for this project is a bedroom suite, and on the second floor, an art studio, and a balcony. What's important about the bedroom suite to point out is that this is going to be an ensuite, actually for Laura's mom. Laura's mom is advancing in age, has some early onset Alzheimer's symptoms and some other social anxiety issues. So part of, or a major portion of having the house where we had a protected entry and exit from her ensuite was to offset this from this access, which we're able to do by maintaining this existing setback edge. So it enforces a view, which is great, but the way more important piece of this from the client perspective and from our perspective of design is to maintain a sense of privacy in this location so that people aren't looking straight through into the bedroom from the front door, which would be what would happen if required to use the setback. So unfortunately, the setback just causes a really unpleasant little bump. We pushed everything over. What it does now is it causes an unsightly view right into Laura's mom's bedroom suite, which is not at all what we desire. But furthermore, it begins to encroach upon an all-glass family room that already exists here, sort of encroaching upon this view as well. The view for the house obviously extends out this way. That was sort of our guiding, one of my guiding principles in design, so that we could see out through the kitchen and all these things. In moving that, it begins to diminish that view and sort of clutter this area, which diminishes the quality of experience in the house, property value. It's not a good move for the house. And this is the second floor plan demonstrating that as well. To get to the side of the house, so this is what's existing right now. There's a set of large coniferous trees along the edge, the east edge of the property, approximately where the addition would be is proposed. So this is the addition, demonstrating how it's going to be on the back of the house, coming off of this edge and just going straight back. The rear portion is going to be a balcony so that the owners can experience the rear yard. This is going to be the art studio, and this will be the ensuite for Laura's mom. We also wanted to demonstrate that right now we are in an R1A, and so when we calculate our height, we are actually compliant with height restrictions as it stands now in the height of the house. So we are not requesting for a height addition. Right now, with 24/6, we're able to maintain a 10-foot ceiling in this space, which is consistent with what the owner was interested in, and also from a scale perspective. Pardon me. We don't get bigger than the house, so we're not blocking any views, from the front or anything like that. I think it's also important to point out that we do have a couple of a point of view is hardship. Is we cannot build on the other side of this satisfactorily. Part of what the plan of having the bedroom suite on the first level is that as Laura's mom advances in age, if it's necessary to put in a handicap ramp, that we would be able to do so in this location to get right down and out, because this is all paved, and out into where the cars are located. If we, again, just to prove that it's not financially, not very feasible to knock down the garage, to put in a first floor suite in this location, would cost more, frankly, than putting it over here for the 3 feet that we need. So that is why we're here tonight, is because We have a non-conforming condition. We'd like to adhere to the non-conforming condition and not lean more out into it, but just maintain it. And we'd like to do so because, number one, we think it maintains sort of the vision through the house, continuity of the original design, which I think Olmsted would be pleased with. And then I think from a hardship perspective, we really cannot work on this side without taking on, I think, a significant expense. Finally, again, bringing up this point that this access, although it's a very sensitive issue, if we slide this down, it really causes some substantial problems in terms of what the program of the house was set out to be, and causing some real disquietude. And I think an unpleasant situation for what could be, I think, a really great sort of end-of-life situation in a great village, Riverside. So that's our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
When you considered having the addition comply with the setback rules, and you noted the internal layout of the bedroom suite, did you consider having an entry into that bedroom suite as a center door rather than, centered on that north wall, and perhaps pushing the closet to the west? Because that would address the sight line from the front door through.
So if we looked at putting it here, but what it continues to do, it blocks these views. It also begins to diminish the ability. Well, we have a bunch of program that's in here. So if we move, they have a dog. The dog comes in the back. They sometimes hose the dog off in this area, right? Mm-hmm. So if we did that, what you're suggesting, we would move it maybe forward this way, right? And then
no, I'm saying right now you have a closet and a bathroom
right here
on the east side of that addition, and I'm saying split the two: closet on one side, bathroom on the other, center entrance door.
And so have the entry basically be right here.
Correct.
That's fine, except we have stairs that are wrapping around right here, and this is this is like 5 foot right here. So this point coming up here, I don't know that I wouldn't have a conflict in terms of head right there.
And the commissioner's question is similar to one that I had, which is, are there other configurations that you consider that, one, allowed for privacy of the tenant in that bedroom, but also allowed for sight lines for safety into that space? As was noted in the materials, that the family wanted to be sure that they had sight lines in case the mom needed assistance. So did you look at alternatives that would allow those two elements?
We looked at alternatives that were looking at like this, the long sort of side along here. The problem is we begin to really diminish our width right here, which is making it hard to furnish. The further we go out here, the more we begin to block the view from the family room. And the more we move out, the further we also begin to block the views from the kitchen in this direction. And also we start to get further away from visual access from here to here, right? So when we looked at other options of what doing that, we're still only working with what right now is about like 14.5 feet. It gives us a little bit more flexibility to have it up above and higher, because it allows us to not only have the access through the house, but also this as a long access for visual. We have a problem when we push it in this way. We start to get really narrow without starting to take away the view from this area and from this area. So the further we encroach here, the worse off the whole concept of getting views out of the house becomes.
Yeah, and I guess I was saying in that current footprint, right, did you investigate any alternatives that would allow for privacy but also allow for family sight lines into the suite? Well,
we did, but in order to, again, continue to maintain our program, we looked at like shrinking spaces, but we ended up really having like just the bare, like, we thought like, what if this was gone? We could shift that back and move things around a little bit, but we did not find an amenable design that gave us the square footage that we needed to furnish rooms, provide proper storage. Laura's mom is moving from her house and downsizing and coming into this house, so maintaining a proper amount of storage and getting the stairs up. This area, as configured, is pretty tight to make it all work in order to get full bathroom, to get our plumbing up to the second floor, and to get stairs in there, and to get storage in there. So we found that this was the most effective way of doing it, and switching it over to like this side, for example, doesn't give us an access to the backyard. We need to have this space open in order to get access to the backyard practically. And then this rear area of the house is the most private area, which is also to give Laura's mom privacy, so it's the furthest spot away. I mean, we're not able to just build a separate house on this lot, right? That would be ideal. So this is what we came up with the most, which was putting all the programs sort of as a block, sort of block out everything that was happening on this side of the house to allow for privacy over here. And yeah, this was the best option that we could come up with.
What are the ceiling heights in the existing house?
9 feet on the first floor, and the second floor is 8. The ceiling slopes at points, but it's 8'6" in all those spaces, and then on some of the edges, the eaves begin to cut away. So like right here a little bit.
And what are you proposing for the ceiling heights and each of the floors of the addition?
The first floor matches at 9 feet, so the floor plate stays the same, as does the ceiling plate. In the studio space, it's going to pitch up to be a maximum of 10 feet, starting at 8'6" and pitching up.
From just from the drawings, it looks like you're more than doubling the length of that house along the property line. Can you just sort of give us the either by feet or by percentage, what, as far as lengthwise, is being increased over that, what would in effect be almost on the property line?
So this is, to give you a sense, this is 18 feet, and this is about 28, 30 feet. This little fin is 3 feet that goes beyond that, so like 31 feet from here to here.
And the existing?
I think I want to say it's like 28. It's close. They're close.
So
Well,
close
actually,
to-
I'm sorry. I have the survey. I can tell you. Come on.
So generally close to doubling is?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I should have that.
It's 28 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
It's 28 feet from the back of the family room or the back of the kitchen corner?
Back of the kitchen corner. The family room sticks out about another 5.5 feet on the west side of the house.
So 28 feet from the kitchen corner to the back of
So like right here.
the
So
back
like
of that little wing
Yeah.
at the end.
And then
of the
here to
bedroom.
here is like another 30 feet. So yes, like double it.
And in order to fit the addition, you'll be removing these hedges that are here, right? I know
A portion of them. Not all of them. In fact, if you go back to the beginning, when we look at the aerial. So.
And what
trees
is,
and right about there. You
Right.
see how the trees along here.
and what is the plan to replace plantings in that area to soften that, significant kind of hard face on that side?
Well, we have aspirations to save those trees. My guess is that they're coniferous trees, which means that their root ball is small, which means that if we had protection potentially, putting in a foundation there, my guess is it's probably going to have damage. So the initial attempt would be to keep those in place, and if not, then we would look for other planting alternatives, whether that be like growing like vines at the side of the house, like on a trellis or something like that, that would soften it. Or I think that actually probably the most effective, because I think it gives green to the whole wall versus just a couple little bushes along the side. So I think that's how we would address it. Yes.
So just,
Sure.
and if I'm summarizing this wrong, please correct me, the reason not to put it centered off the other edge of the house is to maintain the sightlines or the view out the family room?
Correct, the family room is all, like this area is, first floor is all glass, so putting it over here would ostensibly ruin that.
Is that back wall where the family room is that an addition, or has that been remodeled to make it all glass from when the house was originally built?
It's all glass, yeah. It's like a 1.5-story addition that's on
That's
grade.
an addition.
Yeah. So like this little bump out right here is a 2-story addition to the rear from the 70s, I guess.
What would you call the architectural style of the addition that you're proposing?
Contemporary.
Okay.
It's simple and clean, with siding, lots of glass.
Was there any, well, it doesn't really matter if there was consideration or not, but I think it's curious that there wasn't an attempt to build something symmetrical at the back of the house with the same square footage or perhaps even greater square footage as opposed to something, you know, the rectangle that you're proposing with the.
Oh, you mean like just
wall,
build
the
out like the
wall.
whole way, like
Yeah,
add on?
symmetrical, right, instead of, you know, a square with a rectangle coming out 25 feet or whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think that we felt that the disposition of the site and all the view is basically out this way, right? And so we wanted to sort of capture it with this. We have a deck out here for sort of positioning out here, and then this is, all to capture this. I mean, we didn't really look at this option because it would involve, basically, there's an exterior, 2-story exterior wall that already is filled with glass, that already has a pretty spectacular view. We didn't want it seemed to be sort of repetitive, or at least a waste of money. We were concerned about, we were hoping we could get the most bang for our buck by just coming out this way with new construction, as opposed to trying to integrate with an existing condition.
I was just going to ask one more question about that.
Sure.
I think I might have read that you're proposing that the new addition have stucco on the outside, but that's not much like this. Looks more like cladding or something.
No, the existing house has stucco.
Okay, so
We're
what would
putting
be the exterior?
It'll be wood. It has to be wood siding. We propose cement siding, and that's not viable.
Wood siding.
Yeah. Which are on the rear addition on this 2-story part is vertical wood siding right now.
So not hardy board or anything like that.
You can't. We propose hardy board, and hardy board cement board is not. We building department said we could not use cement board or hardy board.
Okay.
Which we propose that would be like for the longevity of the house would be better.
Can we go back to the second story?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I. So now the studio, and then is that just a balcony with a rail?
It's just a balcony with a rail.
Okay, right. So that'd be right over the bedroom.
Yep.
Okay.
So the bedroom is this whole area, and the studio is half with the outdoor space for the back, for views of the backyard and just being outside.
The wall runs the full length of the balcony, though?
No, we cut this wall down here to just be a handrail, so there'll be like a 3 foot.
You have your elevation view, maybe you want to go to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Whoops, come back. There you go. So right there.
Have you discussed this design with the neighbors to the east?
Yeah, the neighbors to the east wrote a letter of support, which I'm happy to read to you. Do you want me to read it? Sure.
Sure.
Okay. To whom it may concern. We are the neighbors of Laura and Alex Garcia to the east at 107 Lawton Road. We wholly support the plan to add an addition to the back of their house that continues along the line of the existing footprint of their home. To us, it makes no difference whether their addition is moved over 3 feet into their backyard or follows the current footprint. It will not impact the functioning of our driveway, our yard, our views, or our privacy, just as their current home does not impact any of those things. While we haven't moved into our new home yet because of renovations we are making, we have spent many happy hours getting to know our new neighbors, as well as Laura's mother, who will be living in the addition. We would love to see their dreams for their home become a reality. Thank you for taking our thoughts into consideration.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you provide us with a copy?
Sure.
Thanks. Great, thank you. Joel, did you have one?
In your commentary and actually in the east elevation drawing, I think you,
Sorry.
keep going. Yep, that one.
Oop, the existing?
With the trees.
Okay.
You make a comment that the existing trees are 20 feet tall and they would act as a similar screen or wall, or sorry, the addition would act as a similar screen or wall in their place essentially. But right now those yews are really about 7 to 8 feet tall. Do you?
Those trees?
Yes. The
They're-
bushes.
I thought they were a little bit taller than that. Okay, so,
I'll give you maybe 9 feet tall, but not much more than that.
okay, okay. Okay,
It would seem that pushing the addition closer to, asking for a variance to the setback would push that wall closer to the neighbors. And it would, in many ways, create more of an impediment to views and such.
if it's at 9 feet and they're standing on the ground already, or they're at grade, their view is mostly blocked, right? So if it's another 8 or 10 feet, all I'm saying is my point is that their field of vision is, if they're once above 9 feet, all they're seeing is sky, right? So if they tilt that up, they're still seeing sky. I would agree that it's higher, but in terms of the view, I think it could be argued that unless they're on their second story, well, even if they're on their second story, they're almost now on the line with what would be a proposed addition. So I think the views will be cut. I think it would be unfair to say that they wouldn't. However, I do think at 9 feet on when you're standing on grade, I won't say it's the same experience, but there is a substantial blockage of view based on those trees already.
Are you following up?
I don't know what the appropriate follow-up is.
I might have misheard. Did you say the neighbors have trees or bushes on their property line west of their driveway?
The people to the east?
Neighbors to the east, yes.
No, I think those trees are on
That's the neighbor's.
Laura's and Alex's property.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, they just have a driveway. Well, I'll go back to the site plan.
I thought in the letter,
Can,
Yeah, if we can swear you in first.
and come to the podium, please.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Garcia. Can I go over there and point? It would be easier, I think.
Can
for
you use the
guys.
laser? We need to record everything so
Oh,
the board
okay.
can get an accurate record.
Is it the top one?
This is-
Okay.
there you go.
So this is our neighbor's house right here, and then their garage is right here. So basically, there's tall hedges here, and they don't have a view straight back except for their driveway and their parking area. This is all concrete, and they don't have much of a view this way because of the tall hedges. Their view is all of this, which is a fenceless yard of 3 homes. And so they will be sitting on their back deck looking all this way. And then they have a garden back here behind their garage. So I don't believe that us building an addition will really impinge on a view this way because their focus is this way, which is a big expanse of green. And there's a porch swing, there's a back swing and all of that. And they're gonna have in the back, they're gonna have compost and all of that. Hopefully chickens someday.
Thank you. Would you mind going to the proposed plan without variance, please? First floor.
Sure.
So, I am not an architect, but in theory, you could take that west wall for the addition and move it east and keep many of the wants that you want, including the sight line to the backyard for the 4 square. Yes?
Not without making the bedroom not usable. You would be in jeopardy of if you have a queen size bed and a couch, you may not even have enough space to walk in between them. I mean, I don't have a furniture plan, but this room is, you have a bed that would go right here. We're planning on having a little bit more furniture here. And then if you push that in another, ostensibly 4, this is a 3-foot door and, you're looking at another, so 4 feet to have it like right there, right? Would make a room that I don't think would be particularly nice to live in. The proportions start to get long as opposed to square, and I think it would actually be problematic to furnish as well. And with the onset potential of a wheelchair, I think it would be maybe not even usable at that point in terms of having a 5-foot turning radius and being able to move around. So the bathroom as it is right now has a 5-foot turning radius in advance of that. So
Do you have the dimensions of the bedroom as it's drawn there?
Well, I know what it is, yeah. So this is 17 across.
Okay. So it looks pretty square, so 17 by 17 or so? Or?
Right.
Okay.
Actually, might be a little smaller than that. We have been doing some cost reduction, so actually I think this dimension is, this is 15 actually. It's a little bit smaller. But mind you, this is an individual who's going from a house to a room, so we're trying to be and also needing private space because the activities of life sometimes become a little overwhelming. So the idea was to be able to provide a bed and a couch, or at least some sort of bureau, to maybe have a television in there as well. That was the idea, or a chair, something to sit in as a sitting area as well.
Any other questions, comments?
No questions.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions for Director Rapp? Did the village receive any correspondence?
I have not received any correspondence, comments, phone calls from anybody regarding this variance.
Okay. All right, well, presumably, do you want to make the closing statement?
Sure.
It's not required.
I noticed what the other lady said, which is we are here to say that we would like you to consider and accept our variance for bringing the house to be in line with the existing corner. We believe it is the right thing to do for the current owner and for future residents. It maintains the architectural, I think, dignity of the house. And allows for views, and I think makes it continues to have it be a good property. And thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. A motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So as with the prior public hearing, we can have a general discussion, and Attorney Mars, I assume that given that these two variations are intricately linked, we can vote on them together?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can separate them or vote on them together. And can I make a quick comment before we start? So those of you who've been on the commission a long time have heard a number of debates about hardship and what that means, and practical difficulty and what that means, and helped craft the new standards that we're dealing with. But I know some of you are newer, and one of the comments that I wanted to make is we, in many ways, it's easier to say what is not a practical difficulty or a hardship than it is to say what is. And that's because in case law, there are a handful of opinions that say this is not a hardship or a practical difficulty. And one of the things I wanted to point out for your benefit when you're considering this is that they can't be based, hardship or practical difficulty can't be based on a need to accommodate things like the size of one's family or personal health issues. So I think the applicant made a number of good points about the architectural integrity and how the addition fits into that, and I think the health issues are relevant to points like whether this is the financial motivation is the primary reason. So, right, they're saying there's some health issues there, and that's why we're doing certain things, not to make more money. But you shouldn't base your decision primarily on the fact that the individual has some personal health issues, and the reason for that is, they won't always be the owners of this house. So that's one of the reasons that we don't base it on the personal circumstances.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
General thoughts?
In general, actually, I think this is an example of why I would want to enforce the setback distance, and that's partially because we're talking about installing a 20-foot tall wall that's 35 feet long, and I think pushing that to the 7.5 foot distance is more appropriate than having it closer to the property line. The existing hedges, while a barrier to a view, are only about a story tall, and so anything above that will impact light and sound and views. I don't want that to be seen as a rejection of the desire to provide for your mother, because I think that is something that we should be commending and supporting. But I think the argument for the sight line through the house, and thank you for leaving this up by accident, I think there's ways to ensure the privacy of the back room with some rearrangement, although the purpose of the zoning board is not to look at interior design. But interior design was brought into this discussion as a way to justify where this addition needs to be.
it's okay for now to record. Please.
Yeah, to be able to make.
Just to, your comment's well taken, however, I do think it's important to point out that, 35 feet is out here, and we're actually cutting this back, so it's only 2 stories for these 2 sections because we do have an outdoor deck. So just in the spirit,
the point is taken.
in the spirit of accuracy, and if it comes out to here in the trees and then cut back, so we're really talking about a space about that where that's happening. To be fair.
The correction is fair. I don't think my thought process changes, though. I think in summary, I don't support the variation because I think the addition can be built in accordance with the rules, and I think it creates a better end product that way, if it's in conformance.
And I would concur with that. My assumption from reading the information and listening tonight is that I think aesthetically and for future neighbors, potentially maybe not current neighbors, but future neighbors, it would be better to have the setback and allow more foliage or plantings to soften the solidness of the big line that's going to be going in place there.
And where I'm confused on I think we're all getting hung up on hardship, and the guidance that you gave us was very helpful. Understanding the need to keep, the center line. One question I asked was, instead of going center line to the east, could we go center line to the west, which would avoid any encroachment? And the answer I heard back was, you don't want to lose that view out of the family room. And I'm struggling in my mind, how does that become preserving an existing view, which could be preserved, through I'm not sure, but I don't know if that justifies the need for the encroachment.
So if we're going to recommend denial, we need to start thinking about the standards. And so for the first ones, do they not have a practical difficulty or particular hardship? And as Attorney Marr said, or as I'm interpreting what Attorney Marr says and what we have in our ordinance, situations in which the ordinance prevents the owner from reestablishing, restoring, or maintaining a material feature or significant architectural feature related to the lot or structure, I take that as meaning the external features of the home, not sight lines within the home. But that's just my interpretation.
And that's fair. I think, kind of going back to what I said, I think there are methods by which the ordinance does not prevent sorry, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. One of the justifications the architect used to ask for the variance was that the sight line from the front door would end up being directly into the bedroom. And I think that there are ways that the architect has that can rearrange the interior, the rooms, bathroom, and the closet in particular, to keep the view appropriate for the future use of the bedroom, that being of the grandmother, the mother, excuse me. So I don't think that maintaining or adhering to ordinance prevents the goal.
I would agree with Commissioner Hannon and Commissioner Marpool that I just do not see that our ordinance has been met as far as having a particular unusual condition that goes beyond a mere inconvenience. I think there must be many different architectural options that could be chosen here rather than the one that has been, even if it does increase the cost or change the configuration of the existing home more so than it's already being proposed to be changed with additional remodeling and all the rest. And I just don't, so I don't see that the ordinance has been satisfied in that respect.
So can we get a motion on the table so we can go systematically through the standards?
Motion to deny the variance.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion to recommend.
Recommend denial, yes.
Denial of the variance.
Sorry, motion to recommend denial of the variance.
And who seconded?
And I'll second that.
Okay, let's start up top. So can we identify practical difficulties or particular hardships in carrying out the strict letter of the regulations?
The hardship is, as the architect stated, the view into the bedroom and then also maintaining the traditional view plan of a 4-square.
Well, that's the proposed, that's sort of the proposal for what the hardship is.
That's what the hardship is being claimed.
I think so, yes, I think that's
Or
true.
being stated, without putting words in your mouth. And I believe that is not a hardship, and at least the view for the bedrooms portion of this stated hardship, and with regards to the maintenance of the architectural integrity of the 4-square, I think the addition is sufficiently large and different in style that I don't think that consideration of the architectural integrity of the building is a major factor in this.
Any agreement or disagreement with that?
I think put it another way, you distinguish the purported hardship or difficulty from a mere inconvenience, and I'm struggling with finding that it's not just a mere inconvenience.
Thank you. I don't always have the best words.
Yes, and I do agree, I think, with what Commissioner Marpool was saying as far as the desire for maintaining the architectural integrity of the house seems to be diminished by the significant 2-story addition that's being proposed that is not in keeping with the architectural style of the house, as far as I can tell, as far as symmetry goes and style, and it's the entire proposal really. So I don't find that the desire to maintain a sight line from the front door satisfies our conditions.
Other comments on this standard?
No.
Okay. The second one, the purpose of the variation is not based primarily upon a desire to increase financial gain. Mr. Hammersley mentioned increasing property value, but I would say it's not primarily for that. Any-
I would agree.
Okay. Alleged difficulty or hardship is not created by any person having an interest. I think we agree with that. Conditions upon which the petition for variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification.
I think actually the conditions are very similar to many other properties because we have many grandfathered properties.
In many 4-squares.
Right. Non-conforming properties. The granting of variation will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located. We have nothing to add to that, apparently. Granting the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
So,
Finally, the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, or substantially increase the congestion of the public streets, or increase the danger of fire, or impair natural drainage, or create drainage problems on adjacent properties, or endanger the public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood.
I don't think we've discussed all of the facts that would need to be, you know, that we need to have to make a determination on G, actually, as far as natural drainage, or create drainage problems.
I share that concern.
Well, that would be through the approval process with their designs.
Right, they're required to provide a grading and drainage plan, so they would have to address any negative drainage impacts it would have by providing some sort of drainage system, French drain, whatever they would need to do to offset what might be caused.
And it would block some light to the neighbors, but
It would block some light, but the majority of this finding, I think we're okay on.
Director Epp, please call the roll. Unless there's more discussion.
No. Alrighty, Commissioner Marvel?
So we are voting on a recommendation to deny, correct?
Yes.
Which means a yes vote is recommending to deny.
Correct.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Aye.
Commissioner Hannon?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
Aye.
All right, so the motion to deny passes. To recommend denial, I should say, yes.
And again, we are a recommending body. It goes to the village board next, hopefully in January. Meetings, not the first one in January, though.
I don't think so, no.
So
It'll be
second-
the third
third
Thursday in January. It'll be the next meeting date.
Can I ask you a question?
Can you please go to the podium?
Do I have to be sworn in, or can I?
No, the public hearing's over.
Oh, okay, great. So my question is, does it say anywhere, or is it publicly available, what qualifies as a special exemption? Because it's kind of, it would be very helpful for people in the community to know what does and doesn't, as opposed to coming to a hearing and then discovering what does and doesn't when we get to the hearing.
I'm going to let legal counsel field this one.
Sure, yeah, there's no easy way to answer that question or to put anything in writing because these are very fact-specific requests. I mean, think how different yours was than the St. Mary's. And like I said, there's not a lot of guidance even in legal opinions as to what is a practical difficulty or hardship necessarily because it is so fact-specific. So, you know, we have a handful of examples. The classic one is if every other lot is a normal lot and yours has a stream running through the middle of it so that you can't put your house where everybody else has their house, that's obviously a hardship, right? So you have to build maybe into the setback or whatever. But aside from that, I think it would be very difficult for us to provide concrete guidance to applicants.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand.
And I
that.
think staff does a great job of consulting with people, you know, about
Right. I mean,
the
I
standards.
convey that the
and-
standards are in our application. Those are the standards that the commission has to use, that the board has to use, that you have to prove. And so, you know, I recommend that you go through those standards and try to shape your argument such that you are showing those standards. And if you can't, then, I mean, there is no guarantee that you're going to get your variance. You have to prove your case.
So Sonia, I'm just wondering, just to clarify, does that mean that the clarification that the attorney provided for the commission that was influential or helping to influence the decision, is that information provided in the information that is provided to us in the application, such that we could have shaped our understanding about what is important to this commission? Or is that?
Yeah, I mean, that comes right out of essentially the first standard where it talks about the presence of an existing use or structure and regular or substandard shape or size of the lot, rather than the personal situation of the current owner of the lot. So, you know, what we're trying to say there is your personal situation is your personal situation. It doesn't have to do with the physical attributes of how your lot is laid out. And I was not in any way trying to shape the discussion. My point to the commissioners was that the personal circumstances are not relevant. I think you did a great job of making, or your architect did about making the architectural integrity arguments and those other things. But at the end of the day, the commission has to decide whether it's an inconvenience or something higher that meets the practical difficulty or hardship standard, and that's how it came out.
And so that hardship standard is laid out, I must have missed it. Where
It's
is
in
it?
our zoning ordinance,
And it's part of your application.
and it's on the application itself.
All right, that's great.
So as part of your application, you write how you think the various standards have been met.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, some things are not included, and so I guess I can understand if there's things that you wouldn't be able to say yes or no on up front. The other question I had is just something that occurred to me while I was listening to the conversation. And, you know, I just respect the decision and all the thought and experience that goes into it. But I just, a question mark goes up in my head when some of you said things such as, well, I'm sure there was a better design. And I'm just kind of wondering, on what basis is that judgment made that surely that there is a better design that can satisfy those needs? Is that, are people on the board, do they have, are they architects, or is there architectural experience? I'm just kind of wondering where that judgment is made.
I'm not sure that necessarily it was a better design as opposed to just another design.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's necessarily a judgment of better or worse, but simply that given the constraints, a different design is available or is possible.
That meets the
meeting
code.
the criteria.
Meeting the code, correct.
That meets the code.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think what's important in our code is that, you know, it's there for a reason. If someone is asking for a variance, there has to be a justification for it. I mean, anyone who comes here for a variance should be aware that our inclination is not to grant it, because when you just grant variations, then you kind of negate the zoning code altogether. So it's a serious, you know, matter to ask for a variance.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, I just think historically speaking, this entire village is out of variance, it's out of code. I mean, so it's like whoever came in and just decided to make that judgment is then basically making a summary judgment about the way people have already lived. And so it gets to the point of, are we living for the code or is the code living for us, right?
I think there was,
So,
just to give you some background on it, there was quite a bit of discussion and thought that went into the zoning code as it stands now. And there was a lot of discussion about the level of nonconformity that there is in the town. You know, regardless of what you pick, there's going to be houses out there that are existing and are not going to meet certain setbacks. And so as they wrote the ordinance, they specifically wrote it in there that they wanted people to be able to improve and add on to their homes. And so they did make allowances that you could vertically extend a wall. So if you had a house that did not meet the setback, you would be allowed to put a second-story addition onto it without the need for a variance. They made a code change to say that if you had a non-conforming house, you could put an addition onto the house without needing to go through the variance process in order to be able to do that. But what they weren't willing to say was, you get to put an addition onto your house that still doesn't meet the setback on there. Like, you need to be able to show what the particular hardship, practical difficulty is in those instances to be able to do that. Understanding that there are a lot of homes out there that don't meet the setback. They try to make a way for people to be able to improve their homes without this particular hurdle to have to go through. But at a certain point you do have to call it, and that's the line that the board chose to draw. And so it's been an evolving process over the years. However, this is where we're at this point.
Thank you for your time.
And to your point, Mr. Garcia, in my 4 years on the commission, examples have come, and we've said, you know what, this requires a text amendment. They're right, they shouldn't have to have a variation. We fix things. So we're continually improving the code, or I think we're improving it, based on feedback from our fellow residents.
Okay, can I ask a question? Is that, do I have one more?
Please.
So, in this case in particular, and since this is done, you have a nonconformity already existing, so making a pushover becomes a completely arbitrary move based on a code that was written after the house was built, okay? So following up on that and saying that you have to conform to that, again, I would still argue that I don't think you're doing the architecture service to make these moves. They look inconsistent when you don't have lines that run straight and those kinds of things. You have these sort of jogs that ultimately don't do well for the interior of the house and don't do well for the exterior of the house. Based on what Laura has demonstrated in terms of the views, I don't know that I would make the argument that those trees or that addition make that much of a difference. I'm curious conceptually, just as a board, because I mean, I work in Oak Park, I've worked in Evanston, I've went to other zoning board meetings, and a lot of it has to do with the architectural integrity of the project. And I'm a little bit, I guess, confused. I think like maybe what Alex is saying is even when you do a survey of the area, which I have, there are houses that are non-conforming, clearly. And I see that as an ongoing process. But like a lot of those houses, I don't know what the reasoning is, and clearly, like you said, it's a case by case. But they don't, not being here for those hearings and things like that, they seem similar in terms of their lack of continuity, you know, with sites and those kinds of things. So it's not clear to me how, when you have a village of non-conforming houses, that the solution is just to push everything over to make a less desirable architectural feature, and that's just how it goes. Or, I mean, part of what you're saying too in terms of like putting it at the back of the house, that was never the intent. That would cost way more, and it would actually ruin existing functionable spaces. So saying that that's an option, again, it's not really an option. I mean, I think if you're looking at zoning, I think you are looking at what works for the convenience, number one, to continue to maintain the integrity of the architecture, for one, and also to serve your constituents who are asking for something that actually do have to do with quality of life, and don't make, to your lawyer's point, do not make an untenable situation in a house that would not make it usable in the future. It's not like we're adding a skateboard ramp inside or anything like that. So I guess my question is, so what would be an extenuating circumstance that would work in this case then? Well, the vertical, to add a second floor, we couldn't, by the height of our house, by code, build a third floor on top of there, right? So we couldn't do that. So we have to go back. So I guess, and then by squishing it in and smushing the sight lines, which I think are important architecturally. So if you guys don't look at architectural value of houses, then who does? Because the building department looks at code. So your criteria for making decisions, which you said is, you know, arguably nebulous, right? I mean, I did talk to Sonia. We talked. I mean, that is totally true. We did not predicate our entire argument on Laura's mom, okay? We did point out other things. And to say, well, you know, that just happens all over the place. Yeah, but there are other extenuating circumstances that are involved in that. So I'm asking, like, you know, and so I understand lawyer responsibility to explain those kinds of things. However, are you going to say that that hasn't happened before and that it doesn't continue to happen? And why isn't that considered? Because now, you know, ostensibly this design is not functional for our conditions. And you would have to go back to the day when they purchased their house, and for them to say, in a couple years, when we decide that my aging mother wants to move in, we got to make sure that the house that we bought is going to be okay to do this. Like, people don't think like that. So I understand that you don't use the idea of the aging mother as a criteria. However, I have a hard time understanding how that doesn't enter into the picture. So when you guys do make your decisions and saying you're not architects, you're not this or that, I understand that these are boards, they're advisory boards, and that everyone has to be a real estate agent, architect, I get it. But then what are you basing your decisions on if you don't have that background? And because I read the codes too, right? So it really becomes an opinion, right? It's really your sort of judgment as, are you elected or appointed individuals, correct? Appointed, okay. So I guess my question is, how do you make judgments on those kinds of things if there's not a criteria, like how does that work?
Experience, training.
Okay. Seeing several of these cases, and is there any public record that for future that I could see zoning variances of similar kind that were filed for? Is it FOIA? Like you can?
No, they're all online on
you
our
can
website.
get it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And our videos.
Oh right.
Riverside TV.us.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
And I would just add, I pointed out that the health issues were relevant to certain factors. I just said that they couldn't base that and make their primary decision based on that because that's what case law says, and my job is to point out those things.
Again, this is an advisory board. This will go to the village board. They are the one that make the final decision on this. You've heard the discussion, what the concerns are, and some of the findings and thought process that went into that. You can certainly take that information and create your argument for the village board as it's presented to them and talk about those items and expound upon them. If it's really not feasible to deal with the wall on the other side, on the west side of the building, then you need to make sure that the board's aware of that.
And
so,
question, does the board...
Can you go up to the podium, please? Oh. Sorry. RiversideTV.us.
I'm sorry. What criteria does the board use? Do they use the same board, the same criteria as the zoning board, the village, the board of trustees will use the same one?
They do. So they look at the record of this public hearing.
Okay.
They look at the standards, but they are free to make their own independent determination of the standards if they disagree with this.
Okay, and will we be able to present again?
yes.
Okay, now, and is that where, well, same place?
I mean,
same
it's
video,
not a
right?
public hearings setting, but you have the option to make a statement if you feel that there's something you want to explain to them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to old business. Do we have any?
I don't believe so.
Nothing listed. New business, meeting dates for 2018. I hope everybody brought some form of calendar.
It didn't sound like anybody had too many conflicts with the standard ones, but getting into November and December is always a little wonky with the holidays falling around the fourth Wednesday of the month. I think we have November taken care of. However, for December, D96 meets, I believe, on the third Wednesday of the month, and so there is a conflict with Riverside TV, as well as Commissioner Hull being able to make the third Wednesday of the month. So rather than moving it up to the third Wednesday of the month, we checked with the township, and that Monday or Tuesday of that week are both available. So if anybody has typical problems on a Monday or Tuesday, let me know, but we can, schedule the meeting for that Monday or Tuesday rather than a Wednesday.
For what month are we talking about?
December.
December
2018.
So 17th or 18th.
A year from now.
Yes, I know.
Are you free, Jack?
So I don't know if people have conflicts on Mondays or Tuesdays and there'd be trouble getting a quorum, let me know. But otherwise, I think in the past we've done a Monday in December's. So if that would work with everybody, maybe we can try and do Monday, or if Tuesdays are better, we can do the
I would
Tuesday.
prefer Monday, but flexible.
Either's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Either are okay for me, generally.
Okay.
Could you remind me what you said about the November of 18?
I think the November one, and of course I accidentally closed my
The 28th?
email. So I believe we have it moved up.
Moved back.
Yeah.
Oh, it is the fourth Wednesday, the 28th. That's what I
Right.
have written down.
Okay.
And Thanksgiving is the 22nd, according to my calendar.
So this would be the
Right.
week after.
So the
So I
week
think that
after.
one was one that didn't have to move because it
Yeah.
didn't fall in the same week. That's
Right, okay.
There we go.
As far as I know.
Yeah, that's right. So I think we have it scheduled for the 28th with no change in that. So the only change from our norm of fourth Wednesday would be for December, so.
Moving on to information, Director Abt, I was curious, sort of as a year in review thing, how many vacation rental licenses does Village have now?
Whole one.
Still one, awesome.
A whole one.
All of our hard work. And a few months ago, I was driving down Burlington, and I think most of us were here, half of us were here, when we recommended a text amendment allowing metal roofs. And I saw the house that had asked for it.
Do you remember
And
the address?
on Burlington,
I can email it to you guys.
Could you please?
Yeah.
And I didn't notice it because of the roof. I saw the contractor sign in the yard, and I looked up, and it was beautiful. Really nice, so just noting that. First American is starting their dumpster
Yes.
shelter.
Yes.
Slowly. And then gas canopies, have all of them now changed? Minuteman sold, so are they planning to change theirs?
Possibly.
And then 7-Eleven has already changed?
Yeah, 7-Eleven has started their changes, and Marathon did theirs already, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We've been busy. That's all I have. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday. And Happy New Year, and motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ben hates that. It's closing meeting.